The auctioneer's laughter echoed across the crowded salvage yard just as the single father raised his hand one final time. People turned, smirked, and whispered as the battered, twisted wreck rolled into view, its frame bent, its paint destroyed, and its future seemingly buried beneath rust and broken glass. Someone loudly joked that the poor man had finally found a car that matched his empty wallet. Even the bidders who had been silent all morning couldn't hide their amusement. Yet the father never lowered his hand. He simply looked at the broken machine with quiet determination, as though everyone else was seeing a pile of scrap while he was looking at a promise waiting to be kept. If you believe kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances can change lives, take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribe to our channel so our community can continue bringing you stories that remind us never to judge a person by appearances. Graham Mercer had spent the last 7 years raising his 10-year-old daughter, Nora, alone after losing his wife to a sudden illness. Before grief found its way into their home, Graham had owned a respected restoration garage in a small American town. Customers admired his craftsmanship because he never simply repaired old vehicles. He restored memories. Every scratch told a story, every faded dashboard reminded someone of a first date, a family vacation, or a parent who was no longer alive. Graham believed machines deserved second chances because people often did too. After hospital bills consumed nearly everything he owned, he was forced to sell the garage. What remained was a tiny rented workshop behind an aging hardware store where he repaired lawnmowers, pickup trucks, and anything else people could afford to fix instead of replace. Business barely covered rent, but Graham never complained. Every afternoon, Nora finished her homework on a wooden bench inside the workshop while quietly handing her father wrenches and bolts with a smile that reminded him why giving up was never an option. The annual county salvage auction attracted collectors, dealers, mechanics, and investors from neighboring states. Graham almost skipped it because he had only $4,000 saved after years of careful budgeting. That money was meant to replace the leaking roof over their modest home. Yet something inside him urged him to attend. Sometimes life whispered instead of shouted. Among dozens of damaged vehicles sat one luxury Grand Touring coupe that looked beyond saving. Its front end had been crushed during a collision, airbags deployed, suspension broken, windshield shattered, and nearly every panel scarred. Insurance companies had declared it a total loss. Most professionals believed it would cost 3 times its value to restore. Everyone ignored one small detail. Graham noticed the engine compartment had absorbed the impact in a strangely controlled way. The structural damage looked dramatic, but the core engine mounts remained surprisingly straight. Years of experience told him the expensive heart of the vehicle might still be alive. Others saw destruction that he saw possibility. When bidding began, dealers quickly dropped out after inspecting the repair estimate. Graham remained until only he and one impatient dismantler were left. The dismantler quit with a shrug, allowing Graham to purchase the vehicle for barely more than scrap value. The laughter followed him as he arranged for the wreck to be towed away. One man shook his head and joked that the single dad had just bought himself the world's most expensive lawn ornament. Graham smiled politely. He had heard worse. The next morning, daylight streamed through the dusty workshop windows as Graham rolled the damaged car inside. Nora stood beside him, carefully sweeping away shattered glass while asking questions about every broken part. Graham never rushed her curiosity. He explained how every bolt mattered, how every measurement had to be exact, and how patience always beat shortcuts. For 30 straight days, father and daughter lived inside a rhythm of determination. They arrived just after sunrise, they worked until late afternoon. Every repair became another lesson about resilience. Whenever money ran short, Graham searched junkyards for compatible parts. He rebuilt damaged components that others threw away. He fabricated brackets by hand instead of ordering expensive replacements. He polished scratched aluminum until it reflected sunlight again. He stitched torn leather instead of replacing entire seats. Every challenge became another opportunity to prove that skill often outweighed wealth. Word slowly spread around town. People who had laughed at the auction began stopping outside the workshop during lunch breaks. Some expected entertainment. Instead, they witnessed something remarkable. The twisted shell gradually transformed into elegance. The crushed hood aligned perfectly. the damaged suspension returned to factory specifications. The engine, silent for months, finally roared back to life beneath. Brilliant afternoon sunshine, even those who knew little about automobiles could recognize extraordinary craftsmanship. One elderly neighbor named Roland, a retired machinist, quietly arrived carrying a small wooden toolbox. Without asking for payment or recognition, he spent several afternoons helping Graham fabricate impossible-to-find components. He explained that years earlier someone had given him a second chance after he lost everything, and now it was his turn to pass that kindness forward. Soon another local business donated premium paint that had been sitting unused in storage. A former upholstery specialist volunteered one weekend repairing interior trim. None of them came because of the car. They came because Graham never asked for pity. He inspired respect. Meanwhile, Nora watched adults rediscover generosity. She learned that kindness often spreads without anyone announcing it. As the restoration neared completion, Graham uncovered an old service record hidden beneath the rear carpet. It revealed the car had once belonged to Eleanor Whitmore, a respected philanthropist who had quietly funded scholarships, veterans programs, and children's hospitals across the region before passing away several years earlier. The vehicle had been purchased by a collector after her estate's sale before eventually being destroyed in the accident. For Graham, the discovery added unexpected meaning. This car had carried someone whose legacy had already changed thousands of lives. Now perhaps it could help another family find hope. Exactly 30 days after the auction, the county hosted its annual collector showcase where restored classics, custom builds, and rare vehicles competed before judges and buyers. Graham hesitated. He almost stayed home. He believed his work spoke for itself. Nora gently reminded him that sometimes people needed to see hope with their own eyes. Together they drove the fully restored coupe into the exhibition grounds under bright afternoon skies. Silence swept across the crowd. The same people who had laughed only a month earlier stared in disbelief. The impossible had happened. The battered wreck had become the most admired vehicle on display. Its deep metallic finish reflected sunlight like liquid glass. The engine purred with quiet confidence. Panel gaps were flawless. Interior stitching looked better than factory original. Judges examined every inch, searching desperately for imperfections. They found almost none. One of the auction dealers recognized the license plate and nearly dropped his clipboard. He realized this beautiful masterpiece was the very wreck everyone had mocked. People gathered around Graham, asking which expensive restoration company had completed the work. He simply pointed toward Nora. He explained that his greatest helper had spent 30 afternoons believing in something everyone else had abandoned. The crowd applauded the little girl. She blushed and hid behind her father's shoulder. News reporters covering the exhibition quickly picked up the story. Photographs comparing the wrecked auction car with its breathtaking restoration spread across social media before the event even ended. Headlines celebrated the unknown single father whose craftsmanship had embarrassed professional restoration shops. Then came the greatest surprise of all. Representatives from the Whitmore Family Foundation attended the showcase after recognizing Eleanor Whitmore's former automobile. They listened carefully as Graham explained every repair, every challenge, and every person who had helped along the way. What impressed them most wasn't the restoration. It was the humility. Instead of taking full credit, Graham spoke about neighbors, volunteers, and his daughter. The foundation announced something no one expected. Rather than purchasing the vehicle for their museum collection, they wanted Graham to establish a community restoration academy where struggling parents, unemployed veterans, and young people could learn mechanical skills while restoring donated vehicles. The foundation would provide funding, equipment, and a permanent workshop. Graham stood speechless. Only weeks earlier he had worried about fixing a leaking roof. Now he was being trusted with rebuilding futures. Months later, sunlight filled a spacious new workshop carrying a simple sign that read, "Second Mile Restoration Center." Inside, experienced mechanics worked beside teenagers searching for direction. Single parents learned valuable trades. Veterans rediscovered confidence. Old vehicles found new life. So did the people repairing them. Every completed automobile helped finance scholarships for families facing hardship. Every graduation ceremony reminded Graham that success meant far more than money. The wrecked coupe remained displayed near the entrance, not as a trophy but as a reminder that appearances rarely reveal true potential. Visitors often asked why Graham never sold it for the fortune collectors repeatedly offered. He would simply smile toward Nora, now proudly teaching younger children how to identify tools and safely polish chrome. Some things, he believed, were worth more than any auction could ever measure. One afternoon, the same man who had laughed loudest during the original auction quietly visited the workshop. Time had softened his pride. He admitted he had judged Graham unfairly and apologized with genuine regret. Graham accepted the apology without hesitation. Holding on to bitterness would have weighed more than any damaged automobile ever could. Forgiveness, he knew, repaired hearts faster than resentment ever could. That moment became one of the Academy's favorite stories, not because someone had been wrong, but because someone chose to become better. Before we reach the end of this journey, leave a meaningful comment telling us what you believe deserves a second chance in life: a person, a dream, a relationship, or even yourself. Your words may encourage someone reading them today who desperately needs hope. The old wreck that everyone laughed at never truly changed the world by becoming beautiful again. It changed the world because one father refused to see what everyone else saw. He looked beyond twisted metal and broken glass, just as he looked beyond his own hardships. He understood that almost everything worth saving appears hopeless before someone decides to believe in it. 30 days transformed a wreck into a masterpiece, but years of quiet integrity transformed a struggling single father into a man who inspired an entire community to believe that broken things and broken lives are never beyond repair. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Remember, the world often laughs before it applauds, and the greatest victories usually begin the moment someone refuses to give up on what everyone else has already thrown away.